Hey, on this episode of Gen X Amplified, we are about to have an amazing conversation with a true passionate advocate and storyteller, because I will be chatting with business journalist Ebony Flake, who is also a writer for Essence Magazine. Yes, I'm sure you heard of that publication, right? And I'll tell you right now, this is going to be a very special conversation and you'll hear why. All right, so are you ready? Let's do it.
What that taught me is that, oh no, you need to carve out a space for yourself. You have to create the life that you want, the career that you want. You need to create a space that is custom shaped for Ebony Flake.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the show dedicated to giving a voice to the very powerful generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. And, as always, thank you so much for listening. As for subscribing to the podcast, I am always so grateful. So this is a very special moment for me, and you'll hear why. So I don't want to wait too long. I want to go ahead and introduce my wonderful guest in the most wonderful way that she deserves. So first, my guest is a highly acclaimed business journalist who has covered the topics of leadership, careers, and entrepreneurship for some of the leading publications, including one of my favorites, Essence Magazine. Now, beyond her editorial excellence, her background includes roles in HR leadership with industry giants like PepsiCo and Sara Lee, and as an entrepreneur in residence with the Ford Foundation, where she co-founded Urban Content Studios. But she is also a passionate advocate dedicated to elevating the voices and experiences of Black women in both corporate America and entrepreneurship. So, without further ado, please welcome someone whose first name so perfectly captures the essence of her passion, her purpose, and her continued possibilities. The amazing Ebony Flake. Ebony, what is going on with you?
Adrian, first of all, let me just say, I'm over here pop locking. Like, that is an intro. You are the master of intros. Club Shay Shay ain't got nothing on you, Adrian.
Wait. I don't want Shannon to come after me now, but look, Ebony, I am so honored. Thank you so much for the compliments. This is very special. First of all, you're just a wonderful person, and you've been very special in my life for a very big reason. And I mentioned in the intro that you, in addition to your passionate advocacy for Black women and the work that you do as a business journalist, you took the time to interview me for featured Essence Magazine, which we'll get to. So I'm forever grateful for you. But this isn't about me. Today isn't about me. Today is about you and your greatness. So, Ebony, I gave a little bit of your intro, but if you don't mind, let's just start off this conversation on Gen X Amplify with you just taking us back to some pivotal moments in your professional journey. Just kind of talk about your background and what led you to this field of yours where you put pen to paper, fingernails to keyboard, whatever the case may be, to start writing and chronicling the stories of people in corporate and career, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Adrian, thank you so much for having me. I love that you're giving a voice to our generation, often overlooked,
Yes.
but not in this space. So I really appreciate that of you. But about my career journey. So I started my career in the corporate space in human resources. So I worked first in recruitment and then kind of moved up to management and director level roles, spanning the consumer products space, PepsiCo, Tyson Foods, moving into kind of the tech startup space. And then, as you mentioned in the intro, kind of veering into entrepreneurship with the Ford Foundation, where I was kind of an entrepreneur in residence. But it's been a really interesting journey. This kind of the role that I have now as a writer with Essence is really kind of a full circle moment for me. I've always been a writer, always been a journalist, and more than anything, I think a creative person.
Okay.
So I began my kind of college career in journalism in Alabama at Auburn University.
All right.
And went there on a full tuition journalism scholarship from the Mobile Press Register and loved it, right? So I worked for the school paper freshman year. And then, Adrian, something really kind of pivotal happened is that I did an internship that summer at a small hometown paper, and I shadowed a reporter as part of that internship. And that reporter sat me down, God bless them, and said to me, I make X amount. It wasn't much. And they were really honest. They said, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I would have chosen a more lucrative career. I love what I do, but this is a really hard profession. Now, this is 98, 99. So we were kind of right at that pivot point where print journalism was kind of slowly kind of rolling back. So it was a really precarious time for the profession. And in a lot of ways, it still is. So I took that advice. Next semester back in school, I promptly changed my major. Wound up in corporate. And so I did that work for a solid decade. Oh, wow. And it was great. It's really kind of what informs so much of my writing. It gave me insights on organizational dynamics and just kind of the politics of the corporate workspace and what it is to be a Black woman, a Black person in those spaces, especially in human resources, where I really do kind of have the peek behind the curtain, where we're kind of in the background running the organization and kind of keeping things aligned. And so that was a beneficial experience, a lucrative and kind of wonderful experience. But once I realized that I couldn't spend my entire career there, I kind of came back to my passion, my first love. And I was able to use the experiences, the networking, the kind of being able to leverage the skills that I learned in business to build a career in journalism. So it really has been a full circle journey for me.
Yeah, that's definitely full circle. I didn't realize that, I just assumed because you're so great at what you do that journalism path just stayed constant. So what was it about when you were working in corporate? What were some of those inflection point moments that made you realize, because you mentioned or alluded to that this may not necessarily be for me. You went back to your passion. If you don't mind just kind of sharing, if you maybe one or two, or just that either aha moment or moments, or what made you realize and have that self-reflection, this maybe isn't for me and I need to go back to my passion point?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Adrian. There were several inflection points. The one thing I will say is I do appreciate the time that I spent there. So I think what I gained from corporate experiences is just the confidence of knowing there were skill sets I didn't know I had, right? So I'm kind of the youngest child, and I've always been, as I mentioned, kind of an artistic, creative. Like in college, I was a poet. So I had this view of myself as kind of this artsy person. But what I found out is that I am very structured, very organized. I do have a type A side to me, and I thrive. I actually love the work of management. I love leading teams. I love kind of that structure. So in a lot of ways, it was really good, and it helped to bring out of me qualities that I would not have otherwise known were there. Wow. So I'm always very careful to just convey how grateful I am to have been given those experiences in so many parts of HR. Now, I did enter human resources in corporate spaces very naively. So I thought that I was there to be the voice of the employee, the champion of the people, right? And so I come from a very blue collar background. My mom didn't graduate college. She worked 2 jobs, Winn-Dixie and Walmart. Oh, wow. And hustled to kind of make sure me and my sister were good. My dad, on the other hand, did kind of some accounting work with different firms. And so he had some experiences there. But I related more to my employees on the front line, right? So that's the work that I get to do today. So it really is, it's been a blessing, and it's all kind of worked together for my good.
No, it's definitely been working together. So Ebony, I want to unpack a few gems in that story. Immediately came out to me is that your level of self-awareness. You mentioned enjoy leading teams, which not a lot of people either know that early on or have the background or the self-awareness that to lead teams. It's not easy to lead teams, to lead people, to navigate personalities. When did you know that you enjoy actually leading teams and managing people? I'm just curious.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting is I think I had a little bit of an advantage. First, I was pretty young in these leadership roles. Okay. And so a lot of the people I managed were my parents' aged. And so I think they just really took a liking to me and had kind of protective relationship with me. So I didn't have as hard a time as I noticed that some of my colleagues had, just because of the rapport that we were able to establish early on. But even beyond that, what I found is that if you assume the best of folks, now let them prove you wrong, right? But if you approach folks from a perspective of, I'm pretty sure that people come to work nobody wakes up in the morning and says, how can I make this day challenging, right? Like, how can I be difficult? Right. And I recognize that, over the span of a career, managers can sometimes become really jaded, and rightfully so, right? We all have experiences that make us kind of put up those guards. I think I was young and fresh enough that I hadn't accumulated that scar tissue. So I was able to kind of go in with an attitude that we're all in this together, and we're all kind of here to tackle one issue or one work project. But I will say that the feedback that I was able to get from the front line and even in performance reviews was that attitude and that approach really did affect the performance that I got back in return. So it's something that I've tried to kind of keep in mind, even moving forward. I think people pick up on energy, right? Like, people know when you believe in them, when you trust them, when you have really good expectations. And it's been my experience that folks often perform up to or down to what it is that you expect of them.
Yeah, they do. That's a great way of approaching that. So you're at this pivot point back to your passion, your purpose in prose, being in journalism. So talk about that moment. Talk about, okay, you'd made the decision to start to pursue this passion of yours. How did you go about that journey? Just kind of curious to just talk about your approach and your mindset and some of the opportunities that came your way.
So, Adrian, I will say, I'm going to start with a disclaimer. Yes. I don't want anybody to do what I did. Do not take my advice.
That's great advice.
I may not do it this way today, but honestly, my approach was about 80% spiritual and 20% strategic. So I had that moment of, this isn't for me. It's time for me to make a pivot. And I hadn't necessarily made a full-fledged plan. I had some thoughts about kind of how I would pursue a writing career. But what I did have is a cushion. And so I gave myself a year. My only plan was, you have 12 months to earn a living doing what it is that you want to do. And if not, you know what? You can go back to work. Like, there's always going to be jobs available. At least that was the case back then. The economy was such back then that HR jobs were in high demand. So that's what I did. I left my job. I put in a 2-week resignation without a ton of deliberation. Once I made my mind up, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so the first thing I did is I started a blog. This was back, I want to say, in maybe 07, 08, in the blog era. Yes. And really pushed it, right? So I'm out here marketing. I'm on Twitter. I am, dropping new blog posts twice a week religiously. So I applied that same work ethic and that same kind of deadline consciousness to that work. And because of that blog, I did get some attention. One of my favorite writers at the time, I just read her book about kind of succeeding in corporate post-college, Angela Nissel.
Okay.
She's a writer for, I think she's written for Boondocks and Scrubs and several television shows, but she also wrote a book, and she reached out to me on Twitter and really just encouraged me and said, you know, I've been reading your blog, and I think you have a really interesting voice and a distinct point of view. And I want to tell you to keep going. Adrian, when I tell you, I printed out that tweet, I framed it, I kept it on my bulletin. That was my North Star for maybe 3 to 4 months. And then Blavity at the time was starting up. They were a baby kind of publication. And
shout out to Morgan.
Shout out to Morgan, who I love. She is one of my kind of career role models. But yeah, I reached out, and they were looking for interns at the time. So I was like the world's oldest intern at that point. But I reached out, and they needed writing samples. I hadn't been published. I hadn't worked for anyone, but I was able to kind of show them those blog posts. Wow. And because of that, they gave me a chance. And from there, I started out as kind of a newsroom writer, and then kind of progressed into lifestyle. And they gave me an opportunity as an older millennial, a cusper, a Gen X Xennial, whatever they call us, to kind of do an adulting column, right? So what we found is that readers were really responding to kind of like career advice and, you know, getting your first apartment and all of the stuff that you're going through in young adulthood, kind of the postgraduate struggle, all the stuff that I'd recently been through, but that Blavity's readers at the time were just navigating and approaching. I was able to kind of coach them through that adulting, that pre-adulting era. And that being published in Blavity really kind of gave me the confidence and the writing samples to send off to other publications. I ended up doing some pieces in Teen Vogue, branched out at some local, at the time I was in Virginia, so was writing for a print magazine locally there. And just when I say hustled, Adrian, hustled. And by the end of that 12-month mark that I'd given myself, I was able to sustain, barely, but I was able to sustain myself just 100% through writing. And then from there, it was about, okay, now how do I make this a more stable career, and how do I continue to grow?
Wow, there was so many lessons in that story. You know, I'm all about the lessons from the journey. I'm all about those nuggets. And, you know, I talk a lot, and I do in my work, I have a framework I teach and do workshops called the Mastery Map, which is based on these 3 pillars, proven pillars of getting from here to there, of having command of your journey based on mindset, meaning, and establishing those milestones. And you just touched on so many of those pillars that I love talking about, because those are some of the lessons and the pillars and the activity and the approaches that I've noticed that the people that tend to have command and mastery of their journey tend to make sure they reframe and have a growth mindset, that they eliminate any limiting beliefs and reframe them to affirmations, to tap into what's meaningful and purposeful for them, and then to establish those milestones. And so going back in that journey, Ebony, you had a goal. You said 12 months. You didn't let the absence of previously published articles in print stop you. You started small. I remember blogging in 08, 07. I mean, was that self-hosted WordPress at the time? Well, first, was it under, did you have your own domain, or was it under like a brand name, or what did you publish on?
You know what? I want to say it was WordPress. It was WordPress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably WordPress.com. I remember those. Yeah. Even before .org, you had to be, it wasn't self-hosted. But still, you learned the lessons, and then you had the affirmation from Angela. You said that was your North Star. So many lessons. And then Blavity, definitely that's a great opportunity in the window. And so it just sounds like you had those wins, those small wins. So I call them those micro milestones that kept motivating you, right? You know, whether it's
100%.
Blavity, whether it's the local publication in Virginia, whether it's the affirmation from Angela. And so what does that come from? Like, in addition to those external affirmations, like that internal drive, Ebony, like what kept you going?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is desperation. Like I knew I needed.
Hey, that'll do it for you.
Yeah. These bills got to get paid. I had a mortgage. I had grown up bills and a grown up lifestyle. And so, but also Adrian, passion. I knew from the time I was 7, 8 years old, I've kept a journal written every day of my entire life from the time I understood what writing was. Always had a pencil, always like just obsessed. And I knew I was talented. I knew I was a good writer. And I knew I needed to do this work, right? Like I had what working and trying to be a normal human being who's able to do kind of the 9 to 5 thing for 10 years of my life. What that taught me is that, oh no, you need to carve out a space for yourself. Like you have to create the life that you want, the career that you want. You need to create a space that is custom shaped for Ebony Flake. Because the one thing I knew, and it's not for lack of trying, is that I was not going to fit into the available templates. I just never have. And for a long time, I thought that it felt like a curse. It felt like, why can't I just be happy, just doing kind of the standard thing? I would love nothing more than that. But it's just not the way I was built. And I believe that God did not make any mistakes. And so I just understood that if there was going to be a path made, I was going to have to create it. But another thing I wanted to mention, just kind of thinking through the work that you talked about doing and the milestones that you set up. And I am familiar with your mid-career mastery, which is, I think it's such thoughtful work, because I think so much of our generation, we've been given the privilege to have these kind of exploratory conversations because our boomer parents and the generations before us really did the hard work to get us to a point where we have a choice, right? So I don't take for granted that even being able to have the option to do what I want to do is such a blessing. And it's so paid for with blood, with activism, with work. So I appreciate that. But Adrian, I think even in speaking with you for the story you mentioned that I wrote on Essence, I think so much of it has to do with our generation. It has to do with kind of our ability as Gen Xers. No matter where we fall kind of on that span, we were latchkey kids, right?
Yes, we were.
We were at home making whole dinners and washing our clothes. And, I think there is something about our generation that understands how to do what we have to do, but also understands how to make a way. Like we are some way makers. So I do think I've been blessed with life experiences that have really trained me, as well as you, right? To be able to figure things out, right? Like to improvise and use whatever we have available to us to get what it is that we need.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. And you mentioned, and I definitely want to transition to a little bit about your insight into the field that you write about mostly, which is, careers and entrepreneurship, workplace. And I'm sure there's not just those topics. But yes, and for those who are listening in, Ebony mentioned that one of the features she did was an article for Essence Magazine that she reached out to me, and it was called Gen X Leaders Are Dominating the C-Suite. And so speaking of passions, that's obviously my passion for those who follow me. And it's great because I learned a lot from you. Even the story that you wrote that featured me, just having the conversation with you, I learned a lot from you because my passion is looking at the different sectors of Gen Xers and people in the middle of the different roles, how they're navigating this world of work. And just listening to your story as a Gen Xer, and as you like to say sometimes, a Beyonce Gen Xer, like the customer, I love that. I think you mentioned that when we were had our call. And I tell people all the time, look, the cutoff years, it varies. It doesn't, if you went through high school without Google, then you probably a Gen Xer. That's how I like to tell people. But yeah, so Thinking about the field, Ebony, you write about, I'm sure you've seen different aspects of generational involvement, interactions, navigating, the years that we're living in now. What is it about writing, particularly about business, careers, entrepreneurship, and even go a little even micro from that, the trials and also the opportunities and the powers of even the Black community, and even going beyond that, Black women, because I know you're very passionate about the powers and the voices of Black women in today's world of work. Can you just talk a little bit more about that subject and through the lens of a Gen Xer who is navigating this world of work?
Oh gosh, such a good question. Let me think about this. So I think first of all, to tackle the Gen X piece, we are so equipped, as I mentioned before, for the work of leadership, for the work of flexibility. And if you think about where the career space is, where the job space is, where the market is right now, there is so much transition.
Yes.
We just went through a whole pandemic.
Yes.
Half the workforce is still at home. Companies are trying to figure out hybrid work. I'm digitally nomading right now in Mexico, right? Like the world looks so different from the way that it looked when you and I started our careers. Yes. There's no way that you're able to interview me from your living room through an app.
No way.
And there's definitely no way that I'm able to write an interview and work full time from a different country, right? So I think if anybody's positioned to lead through such a transition, it's Gen X, right? We saw us go from kind of pen and paper to the internet, right? Like I started college writing letters to sending in paper college applications to where we are now. So we've lived through all of those transitions, and now we're the majority of the C-suite, right? Like now we're leading companies. And so I think when it comes to redefining what corporate leadership looks like, especially given the business dynamics that we're faced with today, I think that we're the right generation at the right time. Now you add to that being a Black American, right? You add so many skills that are required to navigate life. We ain't talking about work. We're talking about school. We're talking about childhood. You think about kind of the nuances of what it is to be a Black American and what that means and how observational you become by necessity, right? You understand intuitively environments where you may be seen as a threat, environments where you may be seen as a novelty, and what that means, right? And how that can work to your advantage. And hey, maybe it's not great to be a mascot, but if that's what this is, then we're going to figure out how to make this work for us. You understand the power of a moment, right? I've written a lot about kind of what happened in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and just a series of events, one after another, that happened that really kind of jolted us into a period of racial consciousness, right? When you think about those moments, particularly in the pandemic where we all had time to feel our feelings in a way that I don't know would have happened if it were business as usual. So it was just everything happened at such a time where the country had a moment of reflection. As Black Americans, we understood. Everybody in my network at the time I was working in tech and kind of working with a lot of entrepreneurs who were Black, and we all knew that this is a moment. This is a moment. It's unfortunate what we go through in this country. Structural and systemic racism is real, and that's unfortunate, and that's something that we do the work of dismantling every day. And we all wish that we didn't have to see what happened to George Floyd. Just as all of the instances that we saw after that, those are traumatic events. And it's nothing that we would wish upon ourselves or anyone. But if those events cause an awakening, right, even back to civil rights, if it takes for the country to see kids in Birmingham being fired with hoses, having Bull Connor sick dogs on human beings for protesting for the right to sit at a if these big, large, traumatic events are what it takes to turn social consciousness, and if that it can be used to our benefit, if that can be used to create civil rights law, if that can be used to gin up support for Black-owned businesses, if that's what it takes to kind of tilt the consciousness socially toward us, then so be it. So you think about all of that stuff, right? At the same time we're mourning, at the same time we're protesting, and at the same time we're recognizing that this is a moment of opportunity for business people and for entrepreneurs. And unashamedly, we're going to kind of pursue whatever doors are opened within kind of that window, because we also understand that it's just a window. Yes. So I think those are the kind of some of the characteristics and the traits and the experiences that we as Black people carry with us that allow us to kind of navigate and lead in corporate spaces. And I also think that those are the experiences that need to be shared. Because we take for granted, you and I were both over 40, we take for granted these experiences and knowing what to do. Right. But I'm reminded every day on TikTok that there's a whole generation for the first time who's walking into offices and they're experiencing what we just know to be true, right? And they're dealing with the pain, the emotion, the navigating, the not understanding, why am I being treated this way? Why am I being reacted to this way in meetings? So I'm reminded constantly that you can never repeat too much or amplify too much or tell too many stories about our experiences. They're always needed, and there's always a brand new, fresh crop of folks who are, right now it's Gen Z, of folks who are entering the workforce and encountering these experiences for the first time.
Wow, you so passionately and eloquently just captured a true ethos of our generation. And I wanted to tap a little bit more into that because based on the stories you tell, the insights that you glean, the conversations you have from your field, right now as Gen X leaders, we're in the world of work of AI, right? Or not even world of work, the world of life. And there's constant conversations around how do I navigate AI as a leader? How do I navigate as no matter if you're early stage, mid-career, Gen Z, Gen Xers, and even boomers who may not be as intentionally embracing this technology, but people wonder if AI is going to replace people. People who use AI is going to replace people who don't use AI, or at least made aware of it. And so can you just talk a little bit about, based on your purview, Ebony, how can Gen Xers really utilize the superpowers that they do have as leaders, as navigating life in the way that we have in this world where artificial intelligence is totally disrupting the world of work?
You said something there that I think was key, just kind of this intimidation to touch AI. Yes. Whether or not we want to engage with AI is going to engage with us. Like it's who's answering your Q&A when you're commenting on website. You're already interacting.
That's a good point.
Absolutely, with the technology. So it's about kind of strategically interacting with the technology. Me, for one, I am not the least bit afraid of AI. In fact, I welcome it. It has made my work and the work of so many people that I know so much better. What it doesn't do is replace your creativity. It's not going to be able to, at least not to this point, be able to take experiences, have your experiences and articulate them through your lens. What it can do is kind of cut in half your research time. For me, in my example as a journalist. It can lead you to the reports where I would spend maybe 20 minutes on Google looking for the perfect brain trust or Deloitte or the specific reporting to research a story. I can now go to an AI app and have that in the palm of my hand. So it's not as if it's replacing me, but what it is doing is taking some of the grunt work off of my plate. It's giving me a personal assistant. So that's my kind of plug for AI. Yes. What I would say though, and it's so funny that you asked this question. I have a story coming out. I interviewed two Black women who, for Essence, who are doing amazing work in ethical AI and the work of bias around that. One is Rachel Gillum at Salesforce and Tiffany Dang, I believe, at Google. And so here are two Black women who are kind of at the forefront of building out that technology of AI. It's here, but we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the potential of AI and the role it's going to play in all of our lives in like 5 minutes. It's coming. But what's so interesting and powerful to me about the work that they're doing, we talked about kind of the structural systems that were designed without us in mind, right? We think about the history of this country where you, Adrian, in our founding document, were classified as 3/5 of a human being, right? That's at the structure of our country. That's the foundational kind of document. Me, I'm property, are women, not even me as a Black woman, but white women were property. They were their father's property and then their husband's property. And their existence beyond that was nothing except in proximity to the patriarchy. So you think about the foundational documents of our country and you think about what we know the role that technology and AI will play. This is a new foundation. It's a new beginning. It's a new opportunity to create systems with us in mind that factor us into the equation. So when I think about these sisters who are doing that work of bias and ethical management and making sure that they're weeding and mitigating bias out of those AI structures that, again, will do the hiring, they will do the interviewing, they will do kind of all that work. And at Google and Salesforce, industry leaders, by proxy, they're setting the standard, they're setting the bar for the entire landscape of AI. So for the first time, I think the promise of technology and specifically AI is that we're being factored in at the root, right? The work of deconstructing systems that are already built 300, 400, 500 years later, it's impossible. The most we can do are cosmetic changes, right? The most we can do is kind of chipping away at systems, but that root is set. So we think about kind of the potential and the hope of systems like artificial intelligence and the fact that organizations are thinking in advance about, okay, we're going to unravel this, but we need to make sure on the front and foundational end that we're doing it with queer people in mind, with Black people in mind, with differently abled people in mind. So for me, this feels like such a pivotal moment that's going to cut across government. It's going to cut across corporations, every aspect of our lives. It's so encouraging to me that we're at a place now where we're able to build foundationally with kind of a more diverse perspective.
Wow. No, so definitely I'm glad I asked you that question because, and because you brought up something that I don't know why I didn't think about it when I asked you that because of your field. Particularly, I mentioned how should we as Gen Xer leaders approach AI, but you in the journalism field, it's for creatives. At generative AI, there's sometimes this fear because you're tasked with coming up with ideas and narrative, but I love the fact that you approach it not as something that's going to take away from you, but that can be additive. And it's normal to have those fears, but you just perfectly outlined that you're approaching this as something that can help you do your job much better, that can cut out research time. You are a journalist. This is your field. And so for many people who are thinking that, again, it's not going anywhere. And we're using AI constantly. And you brought up too that we've actually been using AI for a while, whether it's in search terms, predictive text. This is just now a new level, but to your point, there's so many great opportunities. We're approaching the gold rush opportunities. So you just mentioned some of the gaps that should be filled, some of the way we should be approaching it, especially from a underrepresented community standpoint. So I love that you highlighted the virtues of AI. Ebony, I could talk to you all day. We probably need 3 hours for this because someone in your juxtaposition who writes about, who researches, who chronicles so many stories from so many different people, especially many people in this audience, Gen Xers, because right now we're at a great position in leadership. We have so many stories that we can tell, and I'm so proud of what you do. But before I let you go, there is a question that I always ask all of my guests on Gen X Amplified. And it's a way for me as a music lover, selfishly, to hear about new tunes and things I may not have thought of. But Ebony, so if there was a song that would play anytime you enter a room or walk down the street that perfectly captures the essence, no pun intended, of you, your story, and the brand of Ebony Flake, what would be your own personal theme song?
Oh my gosh. Oh, Adrian. First of all, I need you to be my own personal hype man. Listen, theme song, right now it would probably vary, but at this point of my life, I think it would be "Sweet Life" by Frank Ocean.
Ooh, okay.
You've got to listen to it. It is such a feel-good song about just being in a place of content, of joy. We've got Kamala's candidacy happening. We've got, for me personally, Essence is a dream role. I'm doing the work that I want to do. I've kind of touched on several careers in my life and have truly landed where I am 100% using my voice virtually unedited. Like anything that you see in my byline is kind of me delivering my passion. And then on a personal level, just really enjoying the relationships, the family, the nieces, the nephews, just being in a really good kind of approaching or in midlife space. So it's a sweet life, and I'm loving it.
Sweet life. I have to listen to that song, and that was such a great way. I totally, based on how you told that story, I can see how that captures your ethos and your essence. Ebony, it's been amazing. And again, I'm going to say it again. Having you here is very special to me. This was all about you, but this wonderful woman allowed me to be in print in millions and millions of issues all over newsstands all over the world, in a feature at Essence, which I am so honored. It was, and it didn't even initially intend it to be, I think, that broad. I think it was for a digital article, which was still amazing. And then you emailed me and said, "Hey, guess what? Print and digital, they're like fighting over." And so actually, Adrian, your feature is going to be in the print magazine, in the men's issue, the special issue with Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl quarterback on the cover, millions and millions of newsstands. And I'm like, you kidding me?
I have to tell you this. This is what you don't know.
Okay.
First of all, I tell you this every time I see you on LinkedIn or if you're in my inbox. I associate your face with that was my very first print publication, and it wasn't even expected. As you mentioned, I wrote it for online, but I think that the story was so impactful that it demanded to be published in print. And also, everyone featured, you were one of maybe 4 or 5 leaders. It was like a model shoot. It was like, wait, who are all these y'all were way too attractive. Like, this is dumb. This don't make no sense. So to me, it was like, it made sense that all of these really beautiful, really smart, really powerful and thoughtful Black folks would be featured. But had I known it was going to be in print, it would have maybe shaped up differently. I'm glad that they took kind of those nerves away. But I did want to say that, yeah, if you have great associations with me because of that, it's totally mutual. I see you and I think of my very first print feature. So wow. It's fun.
Wow. Well, thank you. I love this love fest. Ebony, if you don't mind, in addition to everyone listen to this episode again and again and share it, if you don't mind telling the Gen X Amplified audience how they can continue to keep up with you personally, professionally, your writings, and just how they can continue to be part of the Ebony Flake journey.
Yes. You can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram at ebdawn, middle name DAWN _ and then also I'm very active on LinkedIn. Google my byline, Ebony at Essence. Yeah, I get it all the time. And you'll find kind of everything that I'm writing about. And I also have some very exciting things coming up. So I'll reach out to you, Adrian, once things are launched. But it has been such a pleasure. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Well, I'm grateful for you. And I'm telling you, it has to be on your part of your targeted milestones. But I cannot wait to read your New York Times bestseller. One day, you have to write a book. And I will demand of you, you have to. It has to be a done deal. So one day, I'm going to see that book in bookshelves in Barnes and Noble and at Hudson News and airports. But you have a story to tell because you've told so many stories. And like you said earlier, God makes no mistakes with Ebony Flake. Ebony, thank you for spending time with me and our Gen X Amplified audience. Take care.
Thank you, Adrian.
Okay, see, I had been waiting for this so long. I've been waiting for this conversation that I was able to have and bring Ebony to Gen X Amplified. I tell you, this was very special. As you heard in the episode, I had the honor of being featured by her in Essence, but I wanted her on Gen X Amplified to truly unpack her very intentional and inspirational career journey. I tell you, she is a true reflection of what it means to master your career path with intention, with purpose, with passion. And I know you all were inspired by her story. Make sure you continue to follow Ebony in Essence. Check out her byline. Follow her on LinkedIn and continue to be totally inspired by her words, her thoughts, her insights, and all the conversations that she is having with so many leaders out there in the world of work. Thank you, Ebony, so much. It is always an honor to chat with you. And thank you for sharing your greatness with my Gen X Amplified audience. Also, make sure you go to adrianporter.com to check out the episode, show notes, and the additional episodes of Gen X Amplified that you may have missed, or you can always go back and listen to them again. And make sure you listen to them on your mobile device, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you truly enjoyed this conversation, please give us a great rating and review. It helps us spread the word of Gen X Amplified and this movement. And remember to follow me, Adrian Porter, and to continue to be inspired by what we're doing with the Mid-Career Mastery Movement. Thank you again for listening. And as always, take care.